2 2.8 introduced a new menu item called Diagnostics Test. When you click into Diagnostics Test, you'll get an informational pop-up indicating that the utility is really intended to troubleshoot and verify hardware functionality. You are able to enable outputs through this menu, and so it's important to pay attention to what you're doing. However, if you do enable outputs, there is a timeout. They will automatically disable themselves after 3 minutes unless you turn them off sooner. To get into Diagnostics Tests, you always have to acknowledge this message. Once you click in, there's going to be 3 pages of information. The first one gives you a quick look at the hardware initialization status of all of the hardware that the tap controller needs to use to be operating correctly and successfully. And so what we'll see under the hardware initialization status are the initialization status indicators associated with the 807799, which is the onboard analog to digital controller, the LM75, which is the onboard temperature sensor that we use for cold junction compensation, initialization status of the hardware, Wi-Fi hardware, the flash memory, and the outputs. On the right side of the screen, we can see usage information. So this will update every second. It shows the CPU usage, memory usage, and disk usage, much like a computer if you were to go into the task manager. So you can see how heavily loaded the CPU is at any point in time. You can see how much memory is being used, and you can see how much of the available disk space is being used at any point in time. Clicking into the next page, you have the ability to independently control all of the outputs as well as verify the input data. And so starting on the output side, there are toggle switches that give the ability to command any of the outputs on or off. And then there's a status indicator which doesn't show the position of the command, but rather shows the actual output from the controller. And so the controller utilizes a feedback circuit on every one of the outputs. And so when you tell the controller to turn on an output, it's actually checking the voltage out to make sure that it is 12 volts. And if it is, then that status will update to on. If it is not, then it will remain off. And so in this case, we can modify any of these, and you can see alarm is included here. So if you have a loud alarm attached, you can exercise that as well. And so we can toggle these on and off. Safety, we'll hear the mechanical relay click. Clicks on, clicks off. And then outputs 1, 2, and 3, of course, if there's a safety relay in use, you're not going to be able to generate heat unless you have both the safety relay turned on as well as the particular output that you're looking at doing. And so in this case, we can see safety is turned on, output 1 is turned on, and we have status indicating on, which means that the controller has detected 12-volt output on each of those pins. And so right now, what we'll actually see is that these heating elements are generating heat. And I can hold my hand over top and feel that I'm getting heat coming off of each of those. Now, if we were to leave those on, they would be automatically disabled after 3 minutes. If we try to leave this screen while the outputs are on, we'll also see a warning message that 1 or more outputs are still enabled, and you need to disable those before you can navigate away. So we're going to go ahead and turn those off now. And now we'll be able to navigate through the menu again. All right, so that's the output side of this. The input side of this shows you what type thermocouple the controller is configured for, what the current temperature format as set in the settings is. It also shows you channel 1 index, channel 1 temperature, and the CJC temperature. The CJC temp is an onboard temperature sensor that we use to ensure that we get the appropriate readings output when used in conjunction with the thermocouple. Channel 1 temperature gives us the actual temperature as being read by the thermocouple. And channel 1 index is a raw index value that the ADC gets. And so those numbers are essentially the ones and zeros that are then converted into a readable temperature. And so in this screen, we have the ability to verify that the thermocouple is operating as it should. And so when we add temperature or heat to the thermocouple, we can see on screen that that channel 1 temperature is increasing. When we remove, we'll see that it is decreasing as expected. The last page in diagnostics is related to network connection. And so here we can see what the selected network is by the user. They have the ability to display their password by hitting the eye icon, and that'll allow them to make sure that the password they have entered is correct. And it also shows the encryption type of the network. Now, when you select Connect to Network here, it's going to initiate the connection process, and it's going to do it in a way that's different from the network settings page. It's not going to prompt you to enter a password. It's going to use the already stored credentials to try to establish that network connection. So if I hit Connect to Network here, it's going to change the tab over to the network connection output and work on making a network connection here. We can see behind the scenes that some data is filling in on that screen. Once the connection process either succeeds or fails, this connecting pop-up will go away and we'll be able to see what happened. And so we can go up, we can see the information relative to the network, and largely this is going to be for troubleshooting so we can determine whether or not folks have the appropriate network type, whether or not they have the appropriate security type enabled. We can see quality and signal strength and ultimately what the connection chose to do, whether it succeeded or failed.